Eleanor Hartwell had learned long ago that people saw the wheelchair first and rarely looked beyond it. At 71, she moved through the world with quiet dignity, her silver hair always perfectly styled, her cardigans impeccably chosen. But to most people at Willowbrook Gardens Assisted Living, she was simply the woman in room 237 who kept to herself. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Eleanor had spent 40 years building one of the country's most successful textile companies before selling it quietly 5 years ago. The fortune she'd accumulated could have bought the entire facility 10 times over. But Eleanor had learned that wealth, like everything else, was something people judged too quickly. She preferred the anonymity. Here she could simply be Eleanor, not the Eleanor Hartwell whose business acumen had once graced the covers of industry magazines, back when such things mattered to her. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in the community room. Eleanor had positioned herself by the large windows, as was her habit working quietly on a crossword puzzle. The morning sun streamed through the glass, warming her shoulders as she concentrated on the clues. 7 across. Royal Residence, Palace, she wrote in her careful script. A group of residents had gathered around the television, their voices carrying across the room with the casual cruelty that sometimes comes from boredom and frustration. "Look at her over there," whispered Dolores Whitman, a woman who'd never learned to lower her voice as much as she thought she had. "Always sitting alone, nose in those puzzle books. Thinks she's too good for the rest of us? Never joins in the activities," added Robert Chen, nodding toward Eleanor. "My daughter says people like that are just bitter about their circumstances. Can't accept what life's dealt them." Eleanor's pencil paused over the crossword. 14 down. False assumption. She left it blank for the moment. "I heard she doesn't have any family," Dolores continued, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for gossip, masquerading as concern. "Probably spent her whole life pushing people away. Now look where it got her." Eleanor had heard variations of this conversation before. She'd learned to let the words wash over her like rain on a window. Present, but not penetrating. She was used to being misunderstood, but today was different. Because today, 8-year-old Sophia Martinez was visiting her grandfather. Sophia had been coming to Willowbrook Gardens every Tuesday for the past month, ever since her father Carlos had started working as the evening janitor. Carlos was a single parent juggling 2 jobs and night classes, and Tuesdays were the only day he could bring Sophia with him to work. While her father cleaned the common areas, Sophia would make her rounds, bringing a particular kind of joy that only children possess. She had dark curls that bounced when she walked, and eyes that seemed to see everything with wonder instead of judgment. That Tuesday, Sophia noticed Eleanor sitting by herself as the other residents continued their whispered conversation. "Grandpa Joe," Sophia said to her grandfather, who was playing cards at a nearby table. "Why is that lady sitting all by herself?" Joseph Martinez looked over at Eleanor with the kind of understanding that comes from years of life experience. "Sometimes, Mika, people need quiet time. And sometimes, other people don't take the time to get to know someone before they make up their minds about them." Sophia considered this with the seriousness that children bring to important matters. Then, with the fearless curiosity of youth, she walked over to Eleanor's chair. "Excuse me," Sophia said politely. "I like your necklace. It looks like something a queen would wear." Eleanor looked up, surprised. Her hand instinctively went to the simple pearl necklace at her throat. A piece she'd worn so often she'd forgotten it was there. It had been her mother's, then her grandmother's before that. Nothing particularly valuable by most standards, but precious to her in ways that had nothing to do with money. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor said softly. "That's very kind of you to say." "Are you working on a puzzle?" Sophia asked, peering at the crossword with interest. "I am. Would you like to help? Some of these clues are quite tricky." Sophia's face lit up. "I'm good at puzzles. My teacher says I think outside the box." As Sophia settled into the chair beside Eleanor, the whispered conversation across the room gradually faded. Eleanor found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in weeks as Sophia tackled the clues with enthusiasm and surprising insight. "This one says, Royal Residence," Sophia read aloud. "You wrote Palace," But couldn't it also be castle or manor? You're absolutely right, Eleanor said, impressed. The beauty of crosswords is that sometimes there's more than one correct answer, depending on how the other pieces fit together. Over the next hour, Eleanor and Sophia worked through the puzzle together, their conversation flowing easily from clues to stories to observations about the world. Eleanor found herself sharing small memories about her childhood dog who loved to chase butterflies, about the garden she'd tended at her old house, about the satisfaction of building something meaningful with your own hands. Sophia listened with the kind of attention that made Eleanor feel truly heard for the first time in months. You know, Sophia said thoughtfully, my dad says that the most interesting people are usually the quietest ones. He says they're quiet because they're listening and thinking, not because they don't have anything to say. Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. Your father sounds like a very wise man. He is, Sophia agreed. He's studying to be a teacher. He says everyone has a story worth knowing, but you have to ask the right questions to hear it. The next Tuesday, Sophia sought Eleanor out again. This time, she brought a small bouquet of flowers she'd picked from the garden outside. These are for you, she announced, presenting them with the ceremony of a royal court. Because queens should have flowers in their room. Eleanor accepted the flowers with a dignity that matched Sophia's formality. These are beautiful, Your Majesty, she replied, playing along with Sophia's game. I shall treasure them. I'm not the queen, Sophia giggled. You are. The way you sit so straight, and how you always use proper words, and how you know so many things. You're definitely queen material. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. In all her years of boardroom success and financial achievement, no compliment had ever touched her quite like this simple observation from a child who saw past the wheelchair, past the assumptions, past everything superficial. Word of Sophia and Eleanor's friendship began to spread through the facility, but in a different way than gossip usually traveled. Carlos would occasionally mention to other staff members how much his daughter enjoyed her conversations with the lady by the window. Joseph Martinez would smile when he saw them together, noting how Eleanor's face seemed to light up during Sophia's visits. Gradually, other residents began to take notice, not of Eleanor's perceived aloofness, but of the genuine warmth that emerged when she was with Sophia. They saw how she listened intently to Sophia's stories about school, how she helped with homework when Carlos was busy with his work, how she seemed to have infinite patience for childhood questions about everything from butterflies to mathematics. One Tuesday, Sophia arrived with a small gift wrapped in colorful paper that was clearly her own handiwork. What's this for? Eleanor asked, touched by the gesture. It's just because, Sophia said. My dad says the best gifts are the ones you give for no reason except that you care about someone. Inside the wrapping was a small, hand-drawn picture of two figures sitting together. One in a wheelchair, one small and curly-haired, both wearing paper crowns. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, it read, Queen Eleanor and Princess Sophia. Eleanor studied the drawing for a long moment, seeing herself through Sophia's eyes. Not as someone to be pitied or dismissed, but as someone worthy of friendship, respect, and even a kind of regal dignity. This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Eleanor said quietly, and meant it completely. As the weeks passed, Eleanor began to emerge from her self-imposed isolation. She started joining some activities, sharing her crossword expertise, even contributing to conversations about books and current events. The other residents discovered that the quiet woman by the window had traveled extensively, had fascinating stories about building a business, and possessed a dry sense of humor that could make them laugh until their sides hurt. But it was Sophia who had seen it first. Sophia, who had looked past the wheelchair and the silence and declared Eleanor worthy of a crown. One evening, as Carlos was finishing his cleaning duties, he found Eleanor and Sophia in the community room working together on a jigsaw puzzle. Eleanor was patiently helping Sophia sort pieces by color and pattern, their heads bent together in concentration. You know, Carlos said to Eleanor, Sophia talks about you all week long. Queen Eleanor said this, and Queen Eleanor taught me that. You've made quite an impression on her. Eleanor looked at Sophia, who was concentrating intently on fitting a puzzle piece into place. She's made quite an impression on me as well. She has a gift for seeing the best in people. She gets that from her grandmother, Carlos said softly. She always said that everyone you meet is carrying something beautiful inside them. Sometimes you just have to look a little closer to find it. Eleanor nodded, understanding completely. In a world that was often quick to judge and slow to understand, Sophia had chosen to see a queen where others saw only a woman in a wheelchair. And in doing so, she had reminded Eleanor of something she'd almost forgotten. That true nobility has nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with how we treat each other with dignity and grace. As the evening drew to a close and Sophia prepared to leave with her father, she gave Eleanor their customary goodbye hug. "See you next week." "Queen Eleanor," she whispered. "I'll be here, Princess Sophia," Eleanor replied, straightening her shoulders with quiet pride. Because some titles, Eleanor had learned, are earned not through inheritance or achievement, but through the simple recognition of our shared humanity. And sometimes it takes the honest eyes of a child to remind us who we really are.